Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bald Explorer Live. I'm Richard Vobes, and this is our continuing reading on a weekday at 4 o'clock. I'm actually here on time for a change this week. I've had 2 days where I suddenly had to disappear or was delayed. We're reading The Lure of Sussex by an interesting author called Thurston Hopkins, published in 1926, and this is a record of indolent travel. That's the subheading, The Lure of Sussex. We are about, I guess, a quarter of the way through, something like that. We are off to Lewis in this reading, apparently. So that's all very good. I hope that you are well, that you can hear me okay, and that everything is going all right. Hello to John F. Hello to Rammy Boo, who's actually awake for once. Woke up at 6 a.m. with a hangover, headache from steroids. Oh dear. And extra Sean James Cameron has deleted his message. Fair enough. I don't know what the message was, but I was too slow to get it. John Morris, hello to you. Just have a slurp of coffee. I meant to bring in a glass of water, but I was just going through the comments. I got in here early, just going through the comments on today's video, which is about the 3 Dexter cows going to the abattoir, and I knew that there would be some comments from vegans and vegetarians on the subject, of course, and they're entitled to comment as long as they are not offensive or rude or anything like that, and it seems to be okay, so that's good. Sean James Cameron says lifestyle channel. What should make your mind up whether you're the allotment channel or what channel you are. Cup of tea and a slice of lemon drizzle. And Linda Kane, hello all. Hello to you, Linda. I was very close to where you live this morning. I was in Angmering and took a little stroll. Tomorrow's video will, in fact, if I get it edited in time, is Angmering to Poling and then back again. So that's good. A lovely video this morning, says Sean. Very well put together. Thank you very much. Yes, it was nice to work with Frances on this, and of course she was very nervous about it, but we seem to achieve it. Actually, I must send her the link. I hope she's already seen it, but it's like sometimes I just send people the link. Anyway, shall we crack on with the reading? Let's do that. So this is Lewis. Chapter is called Lewis. I always think there is a wistful charm about an old-fashioned chemist shop, and I cannot pass one without feeling a faint touch of romance tugging at my heart. I always expect to walk in and discover a wizard with a tall, cone-shaped hat and a black cloak dispensing love potions and charms. Of course, I never find one, and whenever I want Sedlitz powder, whatever that is, I seem to blunder into a nymph-like lady chemist with bobbed hair, an encounter which immediately cures my headache and sends me out of the shop with a superfluous toothbrush. I have 6 toothbrushes, which were bought with Sedlitz powders. I wonder why he is embarrassed to buy Sedlitz powders. It can't be worse than going in there for any sort of sexual, what's a delicate way of putting it? Rubber johnnies. No, that's not a delicate way. Calderwood's shop in Cliff High Street at Lewis is one of those shops which stand in Elfland. I found it while poking about the old jumble of buildings with high-ridged roofs, projecting eaves and overhanging floors which give this thoroughfare such a crooked and medieval appearance. Lights winked invitingly through round-bellied bottles and carboys, and the golden pestle and mortar sign hanging high on the facade glowed warmly in the winter's amethystine dusk. I could not pass this magician's cave. Some irresistible caprice drew me into the doorway. I attracted the attention of the proprietor, and he very kindly gave me some interesting details about the business. It appears that the books date back from 120 years, showing an apothecary always dwelling in the house. However, as Mr. Calderwood pointed out, a druggist probably traded from this house for a century before that. I should judge that some of the stock bottles and carboys which stand on the uppermost shelves to be well over 100 years old, and several of them were very closely resemble the small carboys which are preserved in the museum of the Sussex Archaeological Society. The front of the shop shows an excellent example of fish scale slate work, and the pestle and mortar sign is very quaint. The mortar, Mr. Calderwood tells me, is a genuine old copper vessel. A companion mortar may be seen in the museum at Barbican House. But the pestle is a wooden dummy. I should very much like to establish the age of this sign. Mr. Calderwood says that it was in its present place when he took over the building some 20 years ago. Perhaps some interesting Lewisham might give us the previous history of this sign before it is lost forever. I don't suppose for a moment the sign is still there, is it? So 20 years before this was published, presumably the apothecary was in the shop, or the chemist, when was this? 26. So in 1906. At the angle of Bull Lane and High Street stands the house where Tom Paine lived as exciseman and tobacconist from 1768 to 1774. This note is superfluous since the house is well known and marked with a tablet, but it leads me to the figure on the corner post which has variously been described as a monkey, Pan even, a satyr, Father Time, and Robert Lediable. If I may be permitted to loose an arrow on the subject, I should describe the carving as a representation of Robin Goodfellow, the familiar figure in the fairy world of Sussex folklore, immortalised by Shakespeare. There is a great similarity between the figure at Bull House and the woodcut of Robin Goodfellow on a black letter tract of the Mad Pranks of Robin Goodfellow, dated 1628. The carved figure at Bull House grins at the passer-by with puck-like glee. He has a sly and crafty look. I have a suspicion that he gets down at night and tangles the legs of Lewishams as they turn out of the taverns and walk home along the dark roads. Somehow he appears to be just the sort of fellow who would do a thing like that. I should judge the date of this figure and the companion one that was liberated from a bed of plaster a year or so ago to be about 1550. I speak from memory, but they seem to be very similar to now, I don't know how you pronounce this, Satyrs, satyrs, which once stood at the corner posts of Dick Whittington Inn in Cloth Fair in London. And this inn was about the same date. It was pulled down in 1916, and the wooden satyrs were placed in the Guildhall Museum. Does anyone know what a satyr is? Satyrs. I always get confused when there's a Y in the word instead of an I, and they spell these things, because I always tend to put it as an E sound, like when you put a Y at the end. Stay. Oh, that's a stay. No, I'm confused myself now. I can't think of an example. Linda Ramiboo says Sedlitz powders is a laxative preparation that contains tartic acid, sodium potassium, tartrate, and sodium bicarbonate, and that effervescence when mixed with water. Oh, and Linda says apparently they're laxatives, so that's great. It's always nice to have this is a bit like that program Countdown, when you go to Dictionary Corner to find out the words that we can't, or I can't, or don't understand. Same pronunciation, satyrs, is it? A demon, a gargoyle, a god, a woodland god, a lord of misrule. Thank you very much. See, you learn something, or at least I learned something. I've not heard of it. It must be an old word. I read enough old bloody books, you'd think I would know. Mr. W.H. Godfrey's charming quarto on Bull House tells us that the building was once the Bull Inn. If one looks for inns, one may find churchwardens, and if for churchwardens, one may find constables. At least I found it so at Lewes. For instance, when I was looking for the landlord of the Bull Inn in the 16th century, I found that Thomas Matthew was one. He was also the churchwarden of St. Michael's in 1562, and presented one of the bells to that church. Again, he was constable of the town in 1560, and again in 1570. In the hearth of an open fireplace in the sitting room of Bull House, a small millstone has been preserved, and it is supposed that it once was a part of Thomas Paine's mill for grinding snuff. Samuel Olive was the proprietor of a small tobacconist shop business at Bull House up to 1769, when he died, and he left it in the hands of his widow and daughter Elizabeth. Thomas Paine, who was a paying guest at Bull House, married Elizabeth in 1771 at St. Michael's Church. His married life was short and probably wretched, for he was spending more time at the White Hart than was consistent with a happy home life. Anyway, his tobacco mill and his other possessions were sold up in 1774, and he separated from Elizabeth in the same year. I should think that if he was spending more time down at the White Hart, it was probably more miserable for Elizabeth than for Thomas Paine. Anyway, if you want to see pictures of Bull House, of course you can search online, but in my film of Lewes, it's all featured in there. Just search Bald Explorer or Richard Vobes Lewes and it'll come up. It would strain the imagination to think of Lewes as a great naval base today, but 60 years ago, well, that would be 140 years ago now, would it not? This was not looked upon as an unlikely phase of development. In All the Year Round of 1862, we read the following: "The town is seated in a very amphitheatre of hills, and is connected by the river with the port of Newhaven, 7 or 8 miles distant on the English Channel. That port, by the way, seems destined to play a more conspicuous part in the future than it has done in the past. Its prosperity has of late years steadily increased. It is admitted to be the best tidal harbour between Portsmouth and the Downs, and a local writer points out that the great level extending from it to Lewes might be converted into one vast basin, wherein all the royal navies of Europe might safely ride at anchor, thus fulfilling the destiny which some have marked out for Lewes of becoming the Liverpool of the South." Gosh, can you imagine if that had actually happened? It would be quite horrible, wouldn't it, now? Because, I mean, it may have been lovely to see all those wonderful tall ships back in those days, but as time went on and we got into metal ships and then diesel and whatever, however they're fueled today with all the cars and buildings, it would of course be ruinous, that whole stretch between Lewes and the Downs, and yet at the moment it is very, very picturesque. An article entitled "An Old Country Town" in an issue of All Year Round 1862, this is not by Philip Mercer, by the way, there is a particularly charming survey of Lewes. The article is unsigned, and it rather tempts me to speculate on the chances of it being the work of the great Charles Dickens. Did Dickens ever visit Lewes? I'm not at all certain. However, several of the clear-cut pictures in this article are worth quotation. This one, on approach to the town from the railway station, has not lost truth or atmosphere in its life of 60 years. So this is a quote that came out in, when did he say? 1862. Here to our right is a narrow lane with red-tiled roofs and red brick pavement, so steep that we have to pause occasionally and take breath, though down this precipitous thoroughfare George IV, when Prince of Wales, drove a carriage and four in order to avoid a longer and safer route. There are other abrupt and narrow paths winding between the old garden walls of flint, overgrown with weeds and grass. Here are the broad, warm-tinted, comfortable old country houses, to which we turn with an inquisitive fondness as to something peaceful and seductive. And here at last is the High Street, with the very large roofs and the very little shop fronts, a very irregular outline and very prevalent hue of glowing red and brown and creamy white, and a very general appearance of being cosily asleep in the hot sunshine, with no intention whatever of waking in a hurry. The same writer describes the view from the leads of the castle keep. Immediately below the eye runs along the ruined walls and the mound on which they stand, and sees the jagged stonework and the muffling ivy, and the nestling trees and the sudden flights of the birds from out of their leafy coverts, the kindly mingling of human art in its decay with the enduring life of nature. To the north extends the rich inland country, hill and dale, woodland and meadowland, the famous Weald of Sussex, uniting with that of Surrey. To the south are the suburb of Southover, the ruins of the priory, fields and trees, green ridges of the downs, and in the distance the sea and the port of Newhaven. To the east, the larger part of the town stretches in a labyrinth of red roofs towards the Ouse, which winds and glides and glitters through the whole panorama. And beyond the river rise Cliff Hill, Mount Caburn, and Firle Beacon. Yes, I too have often invoked the Sussex genius loci from the battlements of the ancient keep. I stood there one wonderful day during the last summer. Is there any other view more beautiful? The mellow red tiles, the ancient drowsy flower gardens, the smooth shouldered downs, rubbing the horizon, gently modulating ploughed lands and fields of indescribable green. A million red poppies aflame. The smell of wood smoke and incense, the warm golden haze of benediction. Below me, a children's fete in a large garden, the faint strains of a band drifting across the mellow stillness. The refrain, God save the King. God save the King. Ah, yes. God save the King. And yes, that's that chapter about Lewes. We'll just pause there for a moment. That's interesting because I don't know how. It is still a nice view, for sure, and pretty uninterrupted by awful new builds. Let's have a look here. A lot of deleted messages here. What's going on? I'm not quite sure. Let's have a look. I'm struggling to understand. I think if you're seeing your messages are deleted, I'm sure that Julia's not doing that on purpose, because they seem to be something going wrong here, because I'm looking at the messages, Pluck like glee. There's nothing wrong with that. Morton Lewis. Oh, yes, you've given me the same pronunciation. Demon. I don't know. Is the lovely... Are you there, lovely Julia? Good afternoon, folks. I don't know whether she's accidentally lent on her phone, because there's so many messages here that have been deleted. A woodland god, yes. The Lord of Misrule. We read all those, fortunately. Nothing wrong with Liverpool, Richard, says Morton Lewis. I've been to Liverpool, and it's big. It's very big. I find it too big and too busy and too built up for my liking, personally. Although I did like round the dockyard. That was interesting. And of course it's got an amazing history in there. Rami Boo says, well, hopefully the fires won't reach the side of town where I live. What fires are you talking about? I would like to know. Rami says, you can't breathe. It just cuts your throat like... I must have missed something there. Linda Kane, how long have they been burning? I think people are deleting their own messages. Why are people deleting their own message? Well, I've got here, it just says, message deleted by Julia. Not quite sure what's going on. Andrew Norris was timed out by Julia. Oh, Morton, I beg your pardon. This blinking phone was indeed in my bag doing what it wanted. Yes, so there we go. I thought something was awry. Apologies. Morton, if you've been timed out, it's not personal. As Julia just said, her phone obviously switched on and it was just randomly doing its thing. So apologies for that. You're all very good people, so there is no reason. I know Julia's been down in the park with her friend this afternoon, and so therefore her phone's been in her bag. So real apologies for that. That's a good job I glanced up. So don't panic. You'll all be back if you've been accidentally timed out. And if you're listening to the podcast of this, which I have yet to put up any of the others, so there's been a delay. I've been a bit busy and hectic actually this week. Then you won't necessarily understand what's going on. But in the chat room as we record this live, Julia, who is the moderator's phone, has just been deleting messages inadvertently and not on purpose. And she says, I have no option to undo the genuine mistake. And she says that she's sorry. Don't worry, Julia. It can happen to the best of us. It's all fine. We haven't missed very much. It's fine. So don't panic. Nice to see you anyway. Right, let's get on to the next chapter. I have a quick slurp of cold coffee. This is a chapter called Lewis to Alfriston. Let's see how this goes. It's interesting, my copy of the book has got some penciled annotations every now and again. Some bits are highlighted, some bits are underlined, some bits have got question marks by. So, for example, somebody's crossed out the word Lewis to Alfriston here because it is actually spelt wrong. In the previous chapter it was spelt right, so it's clearly a typing error or typeset error by the printers. I don't know if Linda Kane, if you look in your copy, I wonder whether yours is equally in error on the title of this chapter on page 48, as you've got an exact copy of it. So, over the top and the best of luck. Ominous words, these during the Great War. Yes, can you imagine? Over the top and the best of luck. Words charged with sad memories of friends who kept their rendezvous with death. Words charged with the weight of piteous wrong and pitiable pain. Words charged with heroism, frayed, straggling, but unbroken. Words charged with the failure, the crime, and the frantic folly of kings and princes. But here, these words will take on a new meaning. On this occasion, our advance will surely bring us luck, for over the top in Sussex means taking the track over the downs. And what better things can fortune bestow on one than the top of the downs, the tang of the brine-kissed air, and the life-giving sunshine from the unbroken vault of the sky. Linda Kane has noticed the spelling error. Thus, as I climb up Chapel Hill at Lewes, I do murmur, as one who tenders a thank offering, these... Sorry, I've misread that. Thus, as I climb up Chapel Hill at Lewes, I do murmur, as one who tenders a thank offering, these hackneyed words, feeling that it is lucky to be able to walk, and lucky to have the downs to walk upon. To reach Chapel Hill, you must pass over Lewes Bridge into the narrow Cliff High Street and cut across the road at the intersection of Malling Street and South Street. Chapel Hill is a heartbreaking slope, and when you climb it, you feel that it is the path of the uprighteousness. No borstal of the downs ever gives me such a twisting to ascend as Chapel Hill. But as it has been used for thousands or so years by the good people of Lewes, it is at least an appropriate introduction to the downs. I'm just trying to think where Chapel Hill is. This is the hill, presumably, at the far eastern end, is it? Above, at Cliff. Is that what he said? I can't remember now if he said that, where it. I'm just trying to think because I've been there. This may be where lovely Julia and I took a walk up. Oh yes, that's right. It goes up to the golf course. Yes, exactly. So this is Julia and I have made a film here. Oh yes, now you've said it. The Chapel Hill. The name rings a bell. Anyway, but as it has been used for thousands of years by the good people of Lewes, it is at least an appropriate introduction to the downs. And it was a steep journey. I remember Julia and I being quite exhausted. Chapel Hill was a well-beaten track in the New Stone Age, for the men of those days were almost invariably selected... The New Stone Age, I think, is what they now refer to as the Neolithic Age, isn't it? For the men of those days almost invariably selected the high ground for footpaths. There were two reasons for this. The hills were free from marsh and bog, and they also provided a clear view, rear and front, so that attacks by fellow men or from fierce beasts could not be made from hidden places on the track. Chapel Hill leads directly up to the golf course and joins the Old People's Trackway running to Saxon Cross, along to Vinegar Shore, through Glynde Holt, across the Dew Pond and down to the village. Now that is a route that Julia and I did a little bit of, but we didn't get to Saxon Cross. I remember that name looking at the OS map. Now maybe I should have to go back there and do a video. Yeah, indeed. Let's have a look. What's people saying? Tang of brine-kissed air. Yes, you do get the tang of... That's a very good description. As we take the track across the golf course, we look down into Bible Bottom. Yes, we did that. North of the Ox Tiddle Bottom, and having no difficulty in discerning this rectangular earthwork which resembles a great book lying open in the trough of the valley. Not sure that I recognise that. Possibly this earthwork, or rather its simulacrum. Hang on, how do you say that? Simulacrum. I think that's how it's pronounced. Of one. What does simulacrum mean? Can somebody tell me what that means? Possibly this earthwork, or rather its simulacrum, is that like a copy of it or a similar one, is the remains of a communal sheepfold. The surrounding hillsides favour this supposition, for they are thickly sprinkled with pit dwellings and straighted with ancient pathways. Everywhere one turns, terraces and platforms overlook Bible Bottom from a dozen points, where the families of our early warriors and hunters lived in their skin tents. From the hillside of Lewes Golf Course, looking over towards Caburn, the eye is immediately attracted by a variety of local interests. The crowning glory of Camp Caburn, or Caburn Camp, the rampart of Ranscombe Camp on the ridge facing it, Oxteddle Bottom, and the Roman road under Ranscombe Hill. I don't know how much of that you would see today. I mean, it's unchanged, but you would have to know where you're looking. It's interesting when you look at the Ordnance Survey map for that area, like so many areas, you see these names. These names are familiar to me, but they, I guess, would have been known so much more in those days than so much now, because people would have walked more or gone by mule, etc. The days I refer to is when this was written. And of course, in 1926, between 1926 and 1939, there was a huge, I don't know whether revival is the right word, but there was a huge interest, perhaps a new, what's the opposite of revival, or the first, so if you've got revival, but you don't have vival, do you? A revived in, if revival is the second part of something, as in you're revisiting something, what would be the initial? Linda Kane says snap, snap, snap. In as much as you recognise the names, but wouldn't necessarily. Anyway, there was a interest in walking, and of course this is when a great number of these books came out of people discovering Sussex and getting people, because you had the railways for one thing that would get people out and about, and the motor car was just coming in, and so there was a certain class of people who might have had time off to do that sort of thing. An image or representation of someone or something. Uprising. A replica for which there is no original. Simulacrum. Thank you. Simulacrum. Yes, Bible Bottom. Lovely, isn't it? Lovely names. Thank you for that. Simulacrum. I've heard it in various things and stumbled across it, but I've never actually read it aloud. So, Simulacrum. Thank you. The old road runs up the hill near the butts. Of course, the butts is where they used to practice their bow and arrows in the old days, their archery. Now, where is he talking about? Is this near Glynde, is it? I'm just trying to work where Ranscombe Hill is on the way to Glynde, if I remember rightly. Anyway, the old road runs up the hill near the butts and climbs to Saxon Down. It's an excellent piece of roadway, 8 feet wide, hollowed by the attrition of human feet, and yet as hard and as durable as the day it was made. Interesting fact, when you go on the downs, you often see these quite deep rutted roads, and one of the things that I read about the other day, actually in a different, what's his name? H.J. Massingham book that I've got, he reminded me that back in the Neolithic times, the water table was much higher, and so the top of the downs was wetter than it is today. The water percolates right through, but it was much higher, and that's how these Neolithic people were able to survive and get their water, because it wasn't so far down. And as a consequence of that, these roads would get wetter more often, and so hence you get the wearing of these roadways and walkways and what have you, because the rain, they would flood basically, and the water would move chalk far much easier. What's the word you when it wears it out? What do you call it when the act of water on stone is whatever it is? It wears it out. Bible Bottom butts. Yes. Anyway, erosion is the word I was looking for. Anyway, it came to me in the end. Yes, I just thought I'd mention that. I can't think why now. Anyway, 2 trackways climb from the trough of Bottom to the ridge of Ranscombe Hill. One ascends from the dew pond, and the other cuts through the Roman road where the hillside is cut out for an ox stall. The trackway from the acute angle with the apex touching the light sign. Sorry, the trackways form an acute angle. It's difficult to imagine this in your head, really, I think, unless you've been there. The right leg of the angle begins at the Ox Teddle, which has bequeathed its name to Ox Teddle Bottom. Ox Teddle is what? That must be just a local name. Does Ox Teddle exist as a word? I've described the position of this ancient excavation with some care because it is likely to be missed by the casual rambler. It's very probably true. So what he's saying is that there is a cutout in the hillside of an ox stall. Now, an ox stall, I don't know what that would be. Is that basically a place where you would keep oxes, as in penned in, halfway up the downs? I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it stands out clearly if viewed from the golf course footpaths. Something to look for on Google Maps, no doubt, or the satellite. When the steep gradients of the hillsides were tilled, the ploughs were pulled by oxen, their strong, steady pull being admirable for such work. And here, in this stall, they were housed after a day's work. There we go. It was probably covered with a roof of reed thatch, and the sides built well up with clods. But when it was last used, I should not like to guess. The steddle, is oblong and about 100 feet in length. So there we go. I think the ox teddle was the ox stall. Yes, thank you, Linda. It's interesting, isn't it? That's a beautiful word, steddle. Ox steddle. So Ox Teddle Bottom, presumably, is underneath where the ox stall is. And the steddle must have been this hut. Absolutely fascinating. I love it when you get a bit more information. He's very good at that. So that would be something to go and find on a walk in search of the ox steddle, if it still exists. I'll have to look it up on a map. If we follow the Roman way up Saxon Down, we shall traverse Saxon Cross and cross the raised road across the slope of Vinegar Bottom, and so to Week Lane and the centre post of Glyndebourne Windmill, now only a skeleton. Yeah, I bet it's not even that. Week Lane touches one with a sense of kinship with the past and the distant. Here is a magnificent road made for life and traffic, cemented, bonded and welded, and yet without the honour it deserves. Rabbits foul its mossy camber and honeycomb its sides. Foxes and ferrets cross-track it from hedgerow to hedgerow. Solitary farmhands amble over it without regard for its history, and in the dusk lovers wipe out its 16th centuries with their kisses. That's rather romantic, isn't it? You wipe out 16 centuries with your kisses. This Roman road, running as straight as chastity for 500 yards to the chalk pit at the crossroads, joined the Roman way with Kent. I'm going to have to look this up because this is just fascinating. Vinegar Bottom is a sun trap in the summer months and a favourable sanctuary for the downland tramper to rest and smoke a pipe when the winter winds have been a little too spiteful. I love it that these old chaps who wrote these books, they all smoked their pipes. It was a day when you could get away with smoking your pipe, and presumably you got cancer, but nobody cared too much. Vinegar is nothing more than a dialectic corruption of vineyard. For here the Romans cultivated grapes, an ideal plantation for vines it must have been. So that's interesting. I mean, presumably in the Roman time, I thought it was wetter in the times of the Neolithic periods, but when the Romans came, perhaps there was a spell of hot sunshine, and they found that it was great for doing that. Now, to somebody like Turbo Stream out there, Adrian, I'm interested to know, you don't know the area at all. I know this area vaguely. We've done some walks over there. I know other areas of the Downs and places that he's been to, like the Lewis chapter, much, much better. But it's fascinating when you read these old books and you glean just a few extra things which, you know, memory has gone from any locals, and they're just markings on maps. And often when I make my videos, I speculate a lot, and often I speculate wrongly. But this is fascinating. So Vinegar Bottom, Vineyard Bottom, how interesting. Linda Kane says, loving the names, if only we knew where they got their names. Well, there we go. So I think Vinegar Bottom is as he says, it's a corruption. So the old Sussex dialect for vineyard must sound similar to vinegar in some way. Steddlestones, says Linda. Yes, that's a beautiful name. Foxy audience today. The Oxteddle was the Oxteddle. Oh, yes, we read that. Isn't it fascinating? So Vinegar Bottom is a sun trap. We got that, an ideal plantation. But we must return to Saxon Cross. Yes, I'm curious about this Saxon Cross. Here, a sunken trackway leads to Glyndebourne Pit. This old quarry is an excellent spot for the alfresco lunch. It is sunny in the summer and dry and chalk warm in winter, and a great place for birds, butterflies and flowers. Oh, to see it in 1926 with the birds, flowers and butterflies and all those wild flowers, to see it then before our intensive farming, I'm sure it was an absolute joy. It is so sad to I mean, and again, he hasn't listed the flowers, but when you read W.H. Hudson and Richard Jefferies and these others that walk across the Downs, and they list all these wonderful butterflies and wild flowers and different species, and you go there now and you're lucky to see anything. In June and July, part of it is always carpeted with wild strawberries. Oh, how wonderful. On the tableland above it, a gateway gives to a private path through Glynde Holt, but the shore can be skirted, bringing the rambler to the dew pond and chalk pit by Speaker's Holt, locally called Pear Tree Shore, and down Glynde Farm. Glynde Chalk Pit is a natural sanctuary for wildlife. Here will be found the round-headed rampion with its head of glorious blue, the spotted orchid, the fly orchid, and the bee orchid, which is quaintly described in the following lines. Perhaps his fragrant load may bind his limbs. We set the captive free. I sought the living bee to find, and found the picture of a bee. Oh, yeah. So there we are. He does name some wild flowers, and I wonder if you'd ever have any chance of seeing those. I may pop there tomorrow. And here is a picture of Mr. Dudley, the shepherd at Glyndebourne. I know you'd be only too thrilled to see a picture of the shepherd at Glyndebourne. And here he is. It's not terribly in focus, I'm afraid. It's not a great print. With his dog and his crook. It's rather nice, isn't it? Linda Kane says, yeah, either the vinegar is as he says, or it's the wine tasted like vinegar. Well, we can never know that because it was the Romans, of course, that were doing it. But maybe it did back in those days. Anyway, how are we doing on the time? We're doing okay. Just see how far we got. Oh, you've got a little bit way to go. From Glynde, you take the road or downland track to Firle. In November 1927... Wait a minute, this was published in 1926. something. He can't be predicting. Oh, 1928. I beg your pardon. I lied about that. I thought it was 26. Okay. In November 1927, I walked over the top of Firle with my old friend Cecil Palmer in one of the most desperate rainstorms I can remember. Our revival at the Ram Inn is also imprinted on my memory. Been to the Ram Inn and had a pint of... not a pint. I've had a half of... What is it? The thing you... Beer and lemonade. Shandy. That's the word. It was closed, but that didn't matter. It was an inn, and the right kind of inn too. We banged on the door, putting our heads to our mouths, trumpet-wise, and bellowed for admission. Can you imagine if you were to do that now? An inn is shut, but you bang on the door. I wonder if that was an old thing with an inn, that you can bang on the door and get admission anyway. I should like to register a public debt of gratitude to Mr. Haffenden of the Ram for his liberal reception on that occasion. We were received like princes, and nothing which might have added to our comfort was missed. In the spacious club-room of the Ram, we unclothed and suspended our complete outfits from chairs before the dancing log fire. Palmer danced around the room, draped in a red plush tablecloth, and achieved incredible postures, while I caught sight of his shrimp pink arms and legs, and I was seized with a tornado of laughter. I cannot think of anything to describe him. He seemed like a pantomime giant, and just as he flung all his legs and arms to the points of the compass and bounded towards the ceiling like a fairy rising from the stage trap, the little servant girl arrived with 2 bottles of beer on a tray. Palmer balked in his half-worked miracle, returning heavily to earth, and the maid threw the bottles and tray up in the air and disappeared with an most earth-shattering scream. Oh, how we laughed! We fell against the walls and chairs with gusty blowings and snortings, following on to a great duet of ho, 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 ha, 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 and finished up with whackings on the stomach, tears and cries of anguish. As C.P. afterwards remarked, I guess that's Cecil Palmer, his friend, remarked, we laughed ourselves dry, and having laughed ourselves dry, we descended to interview Bacchus. I think our old friend, Mr. Haffenden, will recall the day or two we spent under his roof, but that is another story. That sounds like the tales of Hammy Hamster's Adventures at the Riverbank. Always at the end of Hammy Hamster's Adventures on the Riverbank, an old TV programme, the narrator used to round up the story and then almost start another story and say, and that was the day that Hammy clambered up on board and dropped in the water and nearly fell over the weir. But that's another story. And then it would end. Even remember the theme. At Place Farm, Firle, a track leads up to the Downs, walk this actually, and an open walk to Alfriston. An ox yoke is hung on the outside of a barn on this farm, and here may be seen an old-fashioned hurdle-maker's yard and shop. You cannot lose your way to Alfriston by the hill path, for the shimmer of the sea from Newhaven Harbour to Cookmere Haven beckons you the right direction till you drop down to the river valley. Isn't that lovely? And Andrew Norris says, I can play the theme. Ah, how marvellous. All together now. Da-da-dum, 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 dum, dum, da-dum, dum, 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 dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee- with a postscript, which again takes us back to Saxon Down. When you have passed along the straight run of the Roman road to Glyndebourne Windmill Post, you may reach Ringmer without much effort by footpaths passing Goat Farm and crossing the road near Rushy Green. The bridle path enters Ringmer by a picturesque wheelwright's shop with a tiled roof, which a couple of centuries have twisted and distorted into a thing of uncanny beauty. On the ridge you will mark a vein fashioned as a cricketer, as in a wind vane, of course, I suppose, as a cricketer holding two bats, a symbol which will remind you that you are in the famous cricketing village. The Ringmer Cricket Club has its headquarters in the Anchor Inn. I've had a pint or two in the Anchor Inn, where in the club room may be seen records and pictures of Ringmer's players as far back as 1720. Over the fireplace is the sword of Edward Lee Merchant, a Ringmer player who fell at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. A quaint bat is also preserved here. It was used at a match between 22 Clowns and Lewes Priory CC in the early 70s, 1870s I assume, and has a blade wide enough to cover the whole set of stumps. In the church is a great memorial to those players who fell in the Great War, upon which is inscribed, "They played the game." The bust of Sir William Springett, Knight, which will be sorry, I paused there because it said KT and I was thinking, what does that mean? And then it suddenly went, well, it must mean knight. The bust of Sir William Springett, Knight, which will be found in the church, is a link with a momentous chapter in the history of the United States. Sir William, son of Sir Hubert Springett, died at the siege of Arundel Castle. His daughter, Guillermilla Gulielma. I know that's not right. Anyway, Gulielma, Guillerma Maria Posthuma Springett. There's a name for you. Guillerma Maria Posthuma Springett became the wife of the great William Penn. When Guillermilla, whatever her name is, died, Penn wrote of her, "She was a public as well as private loss. She was not only an excellent wife and mother, but an entire and constant friend, of a more than common capacity and greater modesty and humility, yet most equal and undaunted in danger, religious as well as ingenious without affectation, an easy mistress and good neighbour, especially to the poor, neither lavish nor penurious, neither lavish nor penurious, but an example of industry as well as of other virtues. Therefore, our great loss through her own eternal gain." Yeah. Oh, Knight of the Garter. Oh, he was a Knight of the Garter, was he? Ah, right, okay. I always think of those knights in those frilly little can garters. I think, they must have looked quite jolly. There are several monuments to the Springett family in Ringmer Church. Harbert Springett was a kneeling effigy dated in 1620. He was the charitable Springett. Redress he did the wrongs of many a right. Furtherlies and widows by him possess their right. Two other memorials read, "Here lieth the body of Thomas Springett, son and heir of Herbert Springett of Broyle House, died 1643 in the 4th year of his age. Here lieth the body of Mary Springett, wife of Thomas Springett, knight, died 1654. The Springett Chapel was restored in 1922 by the direct descendants of Thomas Springett of Hawkhurst, who died in 1875, and of Richard Springett of Goudhurst, who died in 1869. There's a brass to the 17th rector, John Sadler, which also carried a link to America, for the founder of Harvard College married Sadler's daughter, and an association which is mentioned on the signboard near the village green. I don't suppose that's mentioned anywhere near it now. The name of the Green Man Inn at Ringmer is reminiscent of Lawton Chase and the great Sussex family of Pelham. Ringmer was famous for good timber and bad roads. Defoe once wrote, I travelled through the dirtiest, but in many respects the richest and most profitable country in that part of England. The timber I saw here was prodigious as well as in quantity and in bigness, and seems in some places to have suffered to grow only because it was so far from any navigation, and that it was not worth cutting down and carrying away. In summer months, indeed, a great deal is conveyed to Maidstone and other places on the Medway. Sometimes I've seen one tree on a carriage, which they call in Sussex a tug, drawn by 22 oxen, and 11 then it is and even then it is carried so little away and thrown down and left for other tugs to take up and carry on, that sometime it is 2 or 3 years before it gets to Chatham. For if once the rain comes, it stirs no more than a year. So that's interesting that they would carry a log, but the roads were so bad and they would have to leave it there, and then another one would come and pick it up at another time. Fascinating. We're nearly at the end, ladies and gentlemen, of this chapter. Returning from Ringmer to the hills, we cross Saxon Down and make for Glynde Holt, which leads to Romance. That's romance as in a place, I think, because it's got a capital. I should not reveal this demi-paradise in a book of this kind, for when a horde of people in such a place that's true. I should not reveal this demi-paradise in a book of this kind, for when a horde of people find such a place, there is no romance, and often no propriety, only beer bottles and paper bags left on the eternal downs and hidden in the ways of the woods. So they were having trouble with litter even back then in 1928. Interesting, because those bottles probably would be worth something now, wouldn't they? However, after giving this warning, I will hint of a track which enters the wood above Glyndebourne Pit and runs along the steep side of the bosky hill until it gives out to the Laces at Glynde. From this path you look down to an abyss, whereof the slope is columned with straight boles and starred with dainty violet-blue rampions. You'd be lucky to find the dainty violet-blue rampions. There is a mystery down here, and snakes. The air is heavy with drowsy warmth. Suddenly the path bends, and you look across to Glyndebourne House and the ploughlands of the Weald. But you are looking out from an enchanted wood given over to the little people, or the fairies, as the double plural of Sussex dialect directs the spelling of fairies. You are standing in the beating heart of the Downs. And there endeth that chapter. We are off to wonderful Brighton in the next chapter. Brighton. Wonderful Brighton. It says... Wonderful. Let's hope it is wonderful. That was very joyous. I enjoyed that immensely. Thank you so much for joining me on that hour's little piece of whimsy. Linda Kane says, pronounced Julie Elma, an unusual lyrical feminine from the William of those. Julie Elma. Oh, right, Julie Elma. That was the woman's name I was trying to... a feminine form of William. Oh, Julie Elma. Those who wish to honour William in their family but will find Willie too plain and Wilhelmina too clunky. Yes, I can see that. Julie Elmer. That's quite nice, Julie Elmer. Wow, even then. Sean James Cameron says on the Lifestyle channel, wonderful. I will get my swimming shorts ready for the dip in the sea. Good for you, sir. My granddad always called fairies fairies. When you say called them, presumably you mean spelt them. Is there a difference between how you pronounce fairies and fairies. Thank you, Richard. Great chapter. Glad you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for coming along. Today's Thursday. There'll be one more. So we'll go to wonderful Brighton, according to Thurston. Is it Thurston? Thurston Hopkins. Thurston Hopkins. That was wonderful. Really able to imagine the scenery. Isn't that lovely? Larry Hazelwood says, all of my descendants are from Sussex. There you go. How about that? I wish I could say that myself. I'm not sure where all my descendants come from. I've heard, says Julia, I've heard of that before, but can't remember the details, sadly. So there you go. Anyway, thank you very much. Julie Elmer. I must try and remember that. We've had a lovely afternoon. I've got to go and light the Essie. I've also got to edit tomorrow's video, which will be a walk from close to Angmering, close to where Linda Kane is. So that would be interesting. Thanks for a great read. Loved it as always, says lovely Julia. Lovely to see you. And take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. And I will be back tomorrow. No show tonight. And tomorrow will be my little trudge from Angmering. So tomorrow I may well, if the weather is good, I may go and have a look over those places and see if I can, bring some of that to life as well in reality. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed the video. It really does help. So that's all good. Anyway, take care, look after yourselves, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.